Withdrawing of Lizard security was a typical ZANU-PF style. When they strip you of everything, even your undergarments. This did not start with Lizard and it would not end with him. When the former Vice President Joyce Mujuru was fired by Vasco, she suffered the same fate. All her security and even domestic workers were withdrawn, but Vasco never at any time attempted to exterminate her. That story was sheer fabrication which Lizard created for two reasons. First, to attract sympathy as he has done on countless times whenever his back was against the wall, and secondly, perpetuation of a political score by tainting Vasco and the G40 team. Remember events of 2014 when Lizard was facing imminent firing from the cabinet as Justice Minister. The man then fake-staged an accident involving his ministerial vehicle and Pararini Atwa hospital car in Harare. Everyone sympathized with him including Vasco, who wanted to fire him, and systematically he escaped the axe. In 2017, when succession temperatures became too hot to handle, Lizard first lied about being poisoned at one of Vasco's rallies. He was then flown to South Africa where he stayed for weeks faking treatments whilst he was staying with his friend. Then in 2018, Lizard faked a bomb attack in Bulawayo during an election campaign because he had nothing to offer. In all these acts of cowardice, his prime objective has always been that of attracting sympathizers by playing victim card. I also want to reveal a very significant event tragic of the times. Having been born and brought up in Harare, Zimbabwe, I started my primary school at the age of 7 at a government school called Wadzenai Primary School in the township of Kambuzuma. When I was in grade 4, as common learning standard for grade 4 pupils, we were asked to write a composition from the topic The Day I Will Never Forget. I remember writing about my first experience at school 3 years earlier when I started grade 1. That was a very extraordinary day for me at school with tens of other first-time learners in a classroom. My parents went home and left me amongst a bunch of other young students, strangers, so that experience would remain in my memory for years, and even now I can still vividly recall events of that day decades later. Since then I have come to experience a lot more other life situations as I grew up to be a man I am today, and for over 3 decades I have a regrettable life experience which no child should be exposed to, a tragedy called ZANU-PF. If I was to go back to the classroom today to write the same essay, then definitely my storyline would have to change. That day will change to 18th of April 1980. The day ZANU-PF stole Zimbabweans' freedom and the day Zimbabwe went under ZANU-PF captivity. Precisely, this was a one-day event which has not just affected myself only but delivered unprecedented miseries to majority of Zimbabweans. It was a day that was made with good intentions, but ZANU-PF conspired to reverse those good intentions for criminal ambitions. It was a day meant for acceleration and expansion, but ZANU-PF made it a day for contraction and reduction. It was a day meant for comfort, but ZANU-PF made it a day for anguish. It was a day for happiness, but ZANU-PF made it a day for agony and sorrow. It was a day for celebration, but ZANU-PF made it a day for lamenting. It was a day for promotion, but ZANU-PF made it a day for demotion. It was a day for freedom, but ZANU-PF decided to make it a day of reinforced captivity. This day is 18th of April 1980, the Freedom Day, which became the day of liberation. Slavery, not being slaves to imperialists in imperialist countries, but a slave to your own kith and kin in your own home, slaves of freedom. 18th of April 1980 was never a freedom day for Zimbabwe and Zimbabweans, but it was a day when power was transferred from white settler minority to new black anarchists. This day has one tragic significance. It is the day when ZANU-PF kidnapped the entire country to make it its own private estate, and 4 decades later, Zimbabweans remained hostages in their own homeland and were still to test real freedom. The late Father Zimbabwe, Dr. Joshua Komu, could not say it better than this, and in his own words, this is what Father Zimbabwe had to say: the hardest lesson of my life came to me late. It is that a nation can win freedom without its people being free. This is the state of Zimbabwe 4 decades after attaining independence. Its citizens remained oppressed, slaves in their own country, slaves to ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF improvised the scope of independence to mean a complete different thing, that a country can be freed from the imperialists whilst its people would remain oppressed. It means a country can be decolonized whilst its citizens remain in captivity. It means that independence can just be transfer of power to control from white masters to black anarchists. It means that freedom is not for everyone. If ever there was a way for Rhodesian citizens to sample life in an independent Zimbabwe before 1980, then an overwhelming rejection of independence call would have been inevitable. Given the choice today, everyone would not just opt but sprint back to Rhodesia than remain in Zimbabwe, including those in ZANU-PF. It is not about the color of the skin but the shade of the mind which matters. ZANU-PF proved that those whom one may share the same skin color with also have the potential to deliver more harm and miseries than others of different skin color. ZANU-PF gangsters and their sympathizers needed to be reminded that people are not like trees of the forest which kept on smiling for the same axe which was destroying them. The trees were manipulated to believe that the axe was one of them because of its wooden handle, yet the real axe was the sharp steel edge which sliced the trees. ZANU-PF gang might appear black in skin, but the real ZANU-PF mind which matters has no shade but a monstrous mind. It is like lukewarm, neither hot nor cold. It devours any vulnerable soul, whether black or white. Though we must not tolerate any form of human discrimination, including racial segregation, it is common knowledge that this world was induced to accept this madman's philosophy which separates human species into different categories based on skin color and origin. This separation, they called it race, and all those who practice racism falsely and foolishly ordain themselves as belonging to a superior race than their victims. This is how racism was created, and now, in that era of supremacy and recognition, all other human species were induced to fight for visibility and acceptance. Henceforth the race card has been forever in acceleration mode. This racial discrimination gave birth to widespread injustice amongst races. Ill-treatment and cruelty such as slavery were the common trends. When the imperialists robbed us of our land and freedom, they employed the race card in its severity. Hence the colonial period is a regrettable dark history which is not easy to forget. Racism is inhuman, cruel and immoral, and must be condemned, criminalized and arrested. In essence, racial discrimination is just a component of the whole body of human discrimination. If I am to reflect back to life in Rhodesia, I would just find one error worth condemnation: racial segregation. A segregation which discriminated blacks in everything. Rhodesian Africans were discriminated to particular zones in everything. The settlers did not want to mix with blacks in everything, but human discrimination manifests in several ways, and if anything else, racial discrimination is just a component of the whole body of human discrimination. Regarding the subject of discrimination, ZANU-PF did not at any time sought to take it out. These gangsters only improvised the scope. Discrimination. Out went racial discrimination, and in came ZANU-PF discrimination, an escalation of human segregation, in essence political discrimination. Racial discrimination is about the color of the skin, white and black, but ZANU-PF discrimination has been more severe and brutal. Everyone who did not agree with this gang would be considered not suitable to live a life. Political discrimination is the most dangerous and most evil of all forms of human discriminations because it is void of human conscience. In essence, it is animalistic. The mere significant truth is that, over the years, ZANU-PF has been employing the worst and severe kind of discrimination, by far worse than the Rhodesian racial segregation. Without sanitizing Rhodesian discrimination, it was as evil as the devil himself, but ZANU-PF discrimination came at another level. First to come into my mind is the issue of drought aid. It is for the record that ZANU-PF has been discriminating aid beneficiaries of food donated by well-wishers on partisan grounds during Zimbabwe's dry seasons. This has been happening throughout the 4 decades these gangsters have been in power. If one was deemed not to belong to the club, then such person would not receive aid and would condemned for starvation. Another evidence of ZANU-PF severe discrimination was the tragedy of Kakurahandi genocide, which saw over 20,000 people from Midlands and Matabeleland regions slaughtered between 1983 and 1987 because they were deemed to belong to another political party, ZANU-PF. History has got evidence of how thousands were murdered by ZANU-PF gangsters because they had a different opinion. With Kakurahandi genocide, ZANU-PF attempted to exterminate the entire tribe because their tribe did not support them. Gukurahundi only ended after ZANU-PF leader Dr. Joshua Nkomo was induced into a forced marriage with ZANU-PF, which gave birth to the Unity Agreement of 1987, which saw the merging of ZANU-PF and ZANU-PF into one organization. Had Dr. Joshua Nkomo not agreed to this marriage, then ZANU-PF was prepared to wipe out the whole of Matabeleland and Midlands regions just to get rid of those who did not agree with them. Please take note that ZANU-PF and ZANU-PF unity of 1987 was fake. ZANU-PF only consented into this marriage just for the sake of citizens in Matabeleland who were on the verge of extinction due to non-stop ZANU-PF savage executions. If ZANU-PF had an objective of real unity with ZANU-PF, then there is one critical significance which should have happened: a new identity symbolizing the united new party. This did not happen, and after the fake unity the gangsters retained the same name and also its Jongwe symbol, whilst ZANU-PF lost everything. From that perspective, ZANU-PF was consumed by ZANU-PF. If Gukurahundi is an old story which many millennials do not have much connection to it, then the land redistribution that never was should allay your skepticism. It is for the record that the chaotic land redistribution exercise which followed farm seizures was a mere case of partisan land heist. Majority of the citizens were excluded from the exercise because they were not members of the club. The entire process of land allocation was handled by the club, whilst government officials were only involved in rubber stamping the club's allocations. Instead of solving the land question, the gangsters actually escalated the problem, and from the majority of Zimbabweans' viewpoint, the land question remains unresolved.